Rev up your engines!
Well, you see all these car companies are leaving Russia with the Ukraine war, right? And Renault was one of them that left. Well, now the Russians are taking an old Renault factory and they say they're going to reinvigorate one of their old car models, the Moskvik brand. I guess they named it after Moscow. Who knows, you know? I mean, look at the old ones. Look at that picture. The Moskviks were really bonzo-looking cheap cars. Right? Now, they say it's going to be modernized, you know? And they also say from the grapevine, they're going to be working with the Chinese company JAC, J-A-C. Obviously, they're probably going to be making Chinese cars there, right? And just call them Moskviks. And it's not anything that's going to happen all that fast because the Russians said, hopefully by the end of this year, they'll have produced 600 cars. Now, kind of spit in the bucket, it's not really going to help the Russians looking for cars. It's a pretty big country, and 600 cars is not all that much, but they're trying to make use of the old Renault factory that were in Russia and create their old brand Moskvich, even though it's going to be with Chinese car manufacturers. It'll probably just end up looking like a modern Chinese car. But, you know, they got to keep the Russian aspect, so they're calling them Moskviks. They keep the name, but probably you look on the bottom, everything will be made in China. They'll probably be one of those made in China but assembled in Russia, like the stuff we have here. Well, it's made in China, but this car is assembled in the USA. Here's one I can't help but laugh at. Guy had a Chevy Bolt, right? And if you don't know, all the Chevy Bolt electric vehicles, they had to replace all their batteries. They're, I guess, made in Korea, and they're all made wrong. So the guy has his battery changed by GM. After that, he can no longer do a fast charge on them when he's traveling. And you know what GM said? Well, we're not compatible with their systems of fast charger systems, and you used the fast charger and it destroyed it. So now you can't do fast charge. That was their defense. As GM said, and I quote, GM does not certify individual charging stations nor verify charge operating on a real-time basis. They said, well, the fast charger you went to wasn't one of ours. It doesn't work correctly and it destroyed your car, so don't blame us. They're always going to pass the buck. I have seen this over and over again with these corporations. They give you a warranty, and then something goes wrong, and they say, well, your warranty doesn't count it because you did this, you didn't do this, X, Y, Z. They look for any excuse so they don't have to pay money to fix your car for free, right? In this case, his car did charge up fine at the fast charging, but they had the recall, so he took it in and they gave him a new battery. You think the new battery was better? No, they put the new battery in, now it won't even fast charge, and they blame it on him. They don't blame it on what they did. You put the battery in, now he can't fast charge. Obviously, you screwed up. It's like a bad mechanic who wrecks your car and then says, no, it was that way when it got here, and then you say, no, it wasn't. And they say, well, it just broke then. I had nothing to do with it. Even though these guys changed the battery out and then it wouldn't charge, they deny responsibility. Oh, it was the charging station you plugged it into. It's their fault. We're not going to fix it. And GM's excuse was, if you don't know, on these Bolts, if you use a home charger, it uses the onboard charger in the car. But when you do a fast charger, it's direct current, DC. And they say, well, that charger you plugged it into did it wrong. It screwed up your whole car. The journalists who were looking at the story contacted GM, and here's what GM said. We're looking into this, and we'll let you know what we discover. Well, I'm going to follow up on this, and I'll bet you nobody ever finds out what they discover. It's just like when you're watching the local news, right? And they show a car wreck or car chase, and they'll say, we'll tell you more about this later. They never tell you more about it later. They just like a car chase and a smash, and then away they go. And just like this. I doubt that we're ever going to find out what happened to this guy's EV if they fixed it and actually did work. And I'm sure GM isn't going to tell anybody what it actually did. Maybe they'll buy the car back from them or something, you know, and it'll all be hush-hush, and it'll be a deal where they'll deny responsibility, but they'll pay him money, so then nobody is going to know what happens. That's probably what will happen. Pukey says, how do you determine when to stop fixing a car and just replace it? Very good question. Well, normally it's like if you put more money into the car than the car is worth, it's time to replace it, right? Let's say it needs an engine or a transmission. It's going to cost you anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000, $7,000 to do it right. Generally, you're going to replace the car instead of just fixing it. And of course, there's all kinds of other variables you got to think. Let's say you live up north, right? They use salt on the road. Go into your car and that's all rotting away from rust. Then you're not going to put big money in it because it's going to fall apart and break in half at some point in time. Those are easy. Look, it's all rotting away. Just drive it and don't worry about putting a bunch of money in it, because when the big money thing comes, it's not worth fix it. And if it's really rotten, don't take it on the highway and stuff. Just use it for a local drive. You know, if it falls and breaks, you just get rid of it then. I wouldn't take it on a trip to California, you know, unless you live in California already, right? Some cars you can get a good feeling for if you know the history of the manufacturer. Let's say you have a Nissan with a crappy Jatco transmission, right? And the transmission starts acting up and slipping. Definitely get rid of it now. Don't wait, because then when the transmission does go out and doesn't even move or just clunks like mad, then you're going to have to get nothing for the car when you sell it. Normally, you look at the big picture ones, if the car's rusted or not, and then you go from there. And if you have a quality car, you can't even do it by mileage. You might have a Toyota Corolla that's got 200,000 miles. It might make it to 400. So, you know, you would tend to try to fix that a little bit more than if you had, let's say, you know, a Chrysler that had 100,000 miles on it. It started to break down, and then I'd say get rid of the Chrysler, but I'd keep the Toyota. Haji says, what's more smug, a Porsche or a Tesla? Well, that's a good question, you know. Especially if you're talking the top ends like the fancy Porsches and the Tesla Model S Plaid that, you know, $120,000, $140,000. I'd say it's kind of a toss-up. You know, there's the old joke. What's the difference between a Porsche and a porcupine? Well, the Porsche has the pricks on the inside. Nobody's made any for Teslas yet, but it'd be kind of a toss-up. Historically, Porsche would be the winner because they've been around a lot longer, right? As the new boys in the block with the fancy Teslas, and being that they're electric cars and all that I'm better than you thing. I drive an electric car that doesn't pollute. Maybe they'll take over. I don't know. Legend says, Scotty, can I use Bernie's fuel system cleaner as a preventive maintenance for my '07 Ridgeline? Well, of course you can. It gets rid of carbon. And the thing about getting rid of carbon is any chemical that's going to dissolve the carbon works best on smaller amounts of carbon. If you got a big giant buildup, it could take many treatments to get rid of it. But if you use it once in a while, you'll get rid of what's there and it won't be able to build up as much. It's very good. For those of you who don't know, I'm talking about ATS. My friend Bernie in Albuquerque, he's got these cleaners. The fuel cleaner goes in the gas tank and the oil cleaner goes in the oil, and then you sit there for like 20 minutes revving it up, 1,500, and then you change the oil and filter when you want to clean the engine out. And it's phenomenal for getting carbon out of your engine. It's good stuff. You know, you don't have to use it all the time, but it is a good preventative maintenance, especially in a fuel injection system. If, say, you have GDI fuel injection system, it'd be a good thing to use. Alton Johnson says, I got a question. My '01 F-150 will not complete my IM readiness. It started after I replaced the fuel pump and tank sensor. No engine codes in the system, and have driven 3,000 miles so far. Interesting. It happened after you replaced the fuel pump and the tank sensor. Now, did you disconnect the battery before you did that work? If you did, then it's got to go through everything, right? It's got to go through the whole system. And if you didn't do anything except change that fuel pump and the tank sensor, probably the gasket isn't sealing right on the gas tank where you had to take the big gasket out to get inside, right? If your system in the gas tank isn't sealing perfectly, it won't do the IM readiness. And if it's just a little bit off, it won't be far enough to trip a vacuum leak, so it'll have a code for you got a vacuum leak somewhere, you're running too lean or too rich, depending on where the vacuum leak is. It won't say you're ready. It won't trip that, but it also won't trip a code because it isn't gone too far. You're in the twilight zone, so you might want to do a smoke leak test of that and see if there is smoke coming around that seal. Then you'd have to take it apart, put a new ring on it, because a lot of times people use the old rings and they don't seal right, and you got to get a new ring and seal it. That could very easily be it. But of course, check the wiring around there. You might have knocked some wiring loose. That won't be connected tight. It could do the same thing. Check everything where you worked. J. Carl says, Scotty, these modern stop-start cars, what's the truth? Do they use less fuel stopping the engine starting, or is it using more fuel than leaving it running? If you're going to be sitting for minutes, yeah, you're going to lose less fuel, a tiny bit less, if you stops and then starts. But as I've warned people over and over and over again, 90-something% of the wear in your engine occurs upon engine startup. It's sitting there cold, then you start it up, and then the oil has to be pumped back up with a pump. So for a short period of time, the cams don't have enough oil on. The worst thing on earth is continually turning your car off and on and off and on. Now, I know the manufacturers give this line of BS that, oh, we make better engine bearings and better timing chains and stronger starters, blah, 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 so the start-stop doesn't hurt hurt the engine, but it's a bunch of crap. Because I've seen the engines with systems like they do wear out faster. They get over 100,000 miles. They start burning more oil because you keep starting and stopping, starting and stopping, starting and stopping. Things wear out faster. It's a stupid system. But, they get it better EPA ratings, so, the companies are going to be making them to comply with the government regulations. But, no, it's a stupid system. You save a tiny amount of gas, but, woo-wee, when you got to rebuild that engine, you're going to wish you didn't have that system. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.